Hey guys, okay, today we're going to be replacing the front brake pads, calipers, rotors, brake hose on this 2012 Dodge Ram 1500 with the 5.7 liter Hemi. It happens to be 4x4. I've already done the passenger side, we're going to do the driver's side. It's very similar, and this will apply to many different years of this style of truck, so stay tuned. Okay, first thing we're going to do is take an 11 mil wrench or socket, crack open our one end of our brake line here. Fluid is going to come out. And since we are replacing the brake line, I'm going to clamp it off with this pair of vice grips here. If you're not replacing the brake line, do not do this. What you can do is leave it hooked to the caliper right to the point where you're ready to replace it with a new one, and then just quickly swap them over so you don't lose any brake fluid. Just move that out of the way. Okay, next we're going to compress our caliper so that it's easy to remove from the rotor. So I'm just using a clamp. I've got it on the back side and on the front here. And this is a lot easier with the brake hose removed. You can see the brake fluid coming out there as we squeeze it together. Okay, we're going to use a 13 millimeter socket. We're going to remove our pins. You don't necessarily need to do this if you're replacing the whole caliper, but I'm just showing you if you just wanted to replace the pads. Remove the caliper. Make sure you have a catch pan to catch all the brake fluid that comes out. And then we can remove our pads. With these ones, they actually lost their pad, totally delaminated from the metal. And then we're going to remove our bracket. So I'm just using this breaker bar here. I think it's about 18 inches and a 21 millimeter socket. We'll go ahead and remove our rotor. If it's loose, great. If not, you can hit it with a hammer as long as you're not reusing it. We're putting new ones on. If you do want to reuse it and it is stuck on, you can use a piece of wood to gently tap it off, but you do not want to warp it. Okay, so all I'm doing here is just cleaning things up with a wire brush, and then I'm applying a little bit of anti-seize to the hub face there before the rotor goes on, just so the rotor comes off easily next time. Okay, we're going to take our new caliper. This one happens to be a Napa 53005. And we're going to make sure we clean all the machining oil off it. This is how they come, with brake cleaner. Install it. And one thing I like to do, you don't have to, but I just use a spacer. You can literally use anything, and one of your lug nuts, just to hold it tight on there so it's not flopping around when you're installing your caliper. Just makes it a lot nicer. Okay, so next we need to prep our new caliper. So we'll take it out. 13 millimeter. Remove our pin bolts. You can put a wrench on here to hold these from spinning if they try to spin on you. You're going to need a thin one. I've been using needle nose vice grips, work well. Okay, so we'll just put this to the side for now. Okay, so on our bracket here, you're going to want to make sure these pins are well greased. So they are usually greased from the factory, but they don't put a ton, and you don't really know the quality. So we're going to put a little bit of brake lube on it. I'm using this silicone ceramic brake lubricant. You don't need a ton. You don't want it to do like a hydro lock where it won't go in and out. Make sure your boot goes back on and it moves freely. And while we're here, we're just going to put a tiny bit in the location where our brake pads will slide. And we'll get it on the vehicle. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is prep my bolts for the bracket. So what I do is I put a little bit of anti-seize on the first half, and then on the part that actually engages the bracket, I put a little bit of blue Loctite. And that helps hold everything in place, and the anti-seize keeps it from seizing in this hole if that were to ever happen. And then we're going to torque these down to 130 foot-pounds. Next, we're going to install our pads. They're the same on both sides. You're going to install these clips that come with the pads, and you're going to put it just on the end like that so that this part is facing away from the pad, and one on the bottom. And we're going to install it. And the outboard one is the same. Next, we're going to install the caliper over top of the pads we just installed. If you're using your old caliper, you just have to make sure you compress the pistons back so that you can get them over the pads. If there's any tears in the boots, either replace caliper or fix that, and just check for any leaks. If they're hard to push back in, they're probably no good. And also, I put a little bit of blue Loctite on the pin bolts. And we're going to torque them down to 24 foot-pounds. Notice I've got my vice grips on there just to hold that bolt from spinning. If you have a skinny enough wrench, you can use that. Okay, so next we're going to go on to removing the hose. So what I did is I just cleaned it quickly with a wire brush, and I'm going to spray some brake cleaner in here because we want to minimize contamination as best we can. Then we're going to crack this fitting loose. It's 12 millimeter. Get any debris that was on the back side off. I'm just going to remove the ABS sensor cable here. And we'll remove the bracket with a 13 millimeter. Okay, so I've got my new hose here. When it comes out of the package, it's usually bent in half. So just let it hang in your garage for, half an hour or so, just to straighten it out. You don't want to forcefully bend it straight. And then what I do is you'll see there's brake fluid coming out of there. Just make sure you don't drain your master cylinder, but a little bit won't hurt. I just take some brake cleaner, spray it right on the end, and then let a little bit of brake fluid spew out. And then we're going to put our new hose in, being careful not to contaminate. Just going to put it finger tight. And then we'll reinstall our mounting bracket. I've cleaned the threads on it and put a little bit of anti-seize. Then we're going to snug down our fitting. Keep in mind it's a compression fitting and it's small, so it doesn't need a ton of torque. Just use common sense. Okay, so now we're going to install the line onto the caliper. It usually comes with a new screw. However, if you're reusing yours and you are replacing the brake line for whatever, make sure you get 2 new crush washers. They usually come with the new hose. Take our 1 crush washer and put it on there, put it through. Take our other crush washer, put it on the back. .11 millimeter. And we're just going to snug it down a little bit. And then one trick I do, I don't know if it's recommended, you are supposed to tighten this down to 20 foot-pounds, but before what I do is I just tap it with a hammer a little bit, and then I'll tighten it, and just give it another tap. And what we're doing here is we're crushing the crush washer into the grooves without the chance of stripping the bolt. And then I'll snug it down to 20 foot-pounds. Reinstall our ABS bracket, line, wire. Okay, so now we're going to bleed the brakes, and this part I'm doing here is totally optional, but I'm going to pull out the fluid that's in the master cylinder and replace it with fresh stuff, just so we have all new stuff going into the lines. Next, we're going to fill our master cylinder with fresh fluid and make sure it always stays above the minimum line when we're bleeding. Okay, so I'm on the passenger side here because I did replace this side as well. I've got my one-man brake bleeder, which is just homemade, just a piece of tube into a Tupperware container with a lid and a wire. So we're going to mount it right here, just above the piston with the caliper. remove our little dust cap, place an 11mm wrench on, and then our hose. And then we're going to crack it. And then I'm going to go into the vehicle and I'm going to pump the brakes till we pump enough fluid through that it clears the lines and bleeds the system. And I'm just depressing the pedal almost to the floor and then slowly coming back up, almost to the floor, slowly coming back up. And we're just looking for clear liquid to come out, or somewhat cleaner than it was. And then close our bleed screw. Now we're going to do the same thing on the driver's side. I've already got it cracked. Master cylinder's filled back up. And then we'll close it. Okay, that's pretty much all there is to it, guys. I'm just installing the wheels and tires here now. One couple things you're going to want to keep in mind: just make sure you refill your master cylinder back to the max mark, and make sure everything's clean up there. Put the cap back on, and then take it for a test drive. You're going to feel a little bit of sponginess right off the bat, just until the brakes get set up. But do a couple good stops. Make sure there's no dragging, excessive heat, that type of thing. And then after you go for maybe a 2 kilometer drive, just check to make sure there's no leaks at any of the fittings that were opened up, and then you should be good to go. I'm just torquing the lug nuts on this to 130 foot-pounds, and then usually after approximately 100 kilometers it's good to retorque them again, just in case they came a little bit loose. So hopefully that helps you guys out. If you have any questions or if I missed something, please just drop it in the comments there. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching.